What if everything you thought you knew about life, about love, success, and survival was turned upside down in the blink of an eye? Meet Maxine, a single mother who spent her life fighting just to keep going until one chance encounter with a billionaire turned her world into something unrecognizable. No, it's not about money. It's about trust, transformation, and the kind of love that heals wounds deeper than you ever imagined. But is it too good to be true? Can someone who's lived a lifetime of disappointment really let go and embrace a future she never dreamed was possible? Watch closely as Maxine's journey takes unexpected twists and as she discovers what it truly means to trust, to love, and to let someone in. You won't believe what happens next. Ethan Walker had it all. A successful billionaire with a reputation for being cold and distant. He had built an empire from the ground up. His name was synonymous with power and prestige, but it was also linked to a life that had long been void of anything resembling real warmth. His world was filled with opulent dinners, business meetings in exclusive boardrooms, and endless stacks of paperwork. Yet despite all the wealth and success, Ethan felt an empty space inside him. Something, or rather someone, was missing, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. One winter evening in the heart of Chicago, the snow blanketed the streets and the city was alive with the sparkle of holiday lights. Ethan's routine was as predictable as ever. He had just wrapped up a meeting and was headed to his favorite upscale restaurant for dinner. As usual, he was alone. His mind raced with business deals and numbers as he walked across the street, the cold air biting at his skin. But tonight something would happen that would change everything. As he approached the restaurant, he noticed a woman standing outside. She was different from the others. Her worn-out coat and tired eyes told a story. She wasn't the kind of person who usually crossed his path. Ethan paused, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than he expected. She was holding a small bundle, a baby wrapped tightly in a scarf. It wasn't the baby that caught his attention, but the woman herself. There was something in the way she held the child with such tenderness that stirred something deep inside him. Her name was Maxine, a single mother who had been fighting a relentless battle against poverty. Life had never been kind to her. She had lost everything: her job, her home. And now she was about to lose the only thing that had kept her going: her dignity. She had just been to a shelter to ask for food for her baby, but her pride had stopped her from asking for more. Tonight she was trying to find a warm place to stay, a safe space for her child. Ethan was about to walk past her, his thoughts preoccupied with the usual business of the evening. But then he heard her voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of desperation. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice shaking. "Could you spare some change? I just need to get some food for my baby. I swear I'll pay you back as soon as I can." Ethan stopped in his tracks. The words, simple as they were, struck him with an unexpected force. He turned around, sizing her up. She wasn't asking for a handout in the usual way. There was a certain pride in her eyes, a pride that made him pause. Something about her voice, her vulnerability, caught him off guard. It was as though he was seeing something real for the first time in years. Something beyond the superficial world he had built for himself. Without thinking, he found himself reaching into his pocket and pulling out his wallet. He handed her a large sum of cash. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. But then she looked up at him, and there was a flicker of something raw and genuine in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she clutched the money. I don't know how to repay you." Ethan couldn't explain why he felt compelled to help her. His instincts, honed over years of navigating the cutthroat world of business, told him to walk away. This wasn't his problem, but something in her eyes kept him there, rooted to the spot. Something about her struggle, her fight for her child, awakened a side of him that had long been buried. As Maxine turned to leave, she glanced back at him, her gaze meeting his. "I hope you find what you're looking for, sir," she said quietly. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a strange pang in his chest. He had seen many people in his life, but none of them had looked at him like that. Like they saw beyond his wealth, beyond his name. For the first time, he wasn't just Ethan Walker, the billionaire. He was a man who had just given a stranger his last bit of hope. That night, as Ethan sat alone in his lavish penthouse, The encounter with Maxine replayed in his mind. It haunted him. There was something about her, something that stirred emotions he had long kept locked away. And then the question began to gnaw at him. Why did I give her that money? He had helped countless people in the past, but none of them had affected him like this woman. Ethan knew that he needed to find out more about her. Who was she? What had led her to this point? And more importantly, what would happen if their paths crossed again? A few days had passed since Ethan Walker's unexpected encounter with Maxine. He couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had shifted within him, and try as he might, he couldn't get her out of his mind. In the rush of his high-powered world where deals were made over cocktails and the future of entire industries were decided in sterile boardrooms, the image of Maxine, her weary eyes and quiet strength, kept creeping into his thoughts. He tried to bury it, diving into the endless stream of work that defined his life. But the thought of her lingered, an uninvited guest in the back of his mind. What had driven her to such desperation? What was her story? He found himself asking questions he'd never asked about anyone before. Questions that didn't involve profit margins or market shares, but real human experiences. Maxine, on the other hand, couldn't forget him either. The mysterious billionaire who had offered her so much more than just money. It wasn't just the cash. It was his eyes, the way he had looked at her, like he saw something beyond her circumstances, beyond her tattered clothes and the roughness of her life. No one had ever looked at her like that before, and that left her rattled. She had been in survival mode for so long, focusing only on her daughter Jessica and keeping them both afloat. She didn't have time for fantasies or dreams. Those things were for people with choices, and she had none. But Ethan Walker, there was something different about him. For the first time in a long while, she began to wonder, what if there was more for me? More for Jessica? Days went by, and the weight of their brief encounter settled heavily on both of them. Ethan couldn't resist any longer. He hired a private investigator, something he never thought he'd do. But he needed answers. He needed to know who she was. He wanted to understand what made her so different from everyone else. Why did he feel this inexplicable pull toward her? It didn't take long for his investigator to uncover the basics. Maxine was a single mother struggling to make ends meet. She had been working as a janitor at a small downtown office building, earning just enough to feed her daughter. Her past was filled with hardship. Her husband had left her when she was pregnant, and her family had disowned her. She had no one, and she wasn't looking for anyone either. She just wanted to keep her daughter safe. Maxine's story hit Ethan harder than he expected. For someone who had grown up in a world of privilege, it was a wake-up call. He had always seen the world as a place to conquer, a battleground where victory was determined by wealth and power. But Maxine's world, it was a battlefield too. But the stakes were different. Love, survival, and the fierce will to protect her child. Unable to ignore the pull any longer, Ethan decided to reach out to her. But he couldn't just show up at her door. That would be too forward. Instead, he had one of his assistants discreetly arrange a meeting. Ethan told himself it was just to offer her more financial help. Nothing personal, just a gesture of goodwill. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the real reason. The day of the meeting arrived, and Maxine was understandably wary. She had heard whispers of Ethan Walker's generosity, but it all seemed too surreal. A man like him offering to help her, no strings attached, it didn't make sense. Still, curiosity gnawed at her. What could it hurt? They met in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city, a place far removed from the glitz and glam of Ethan's usual haunts. When Maxine arrived, she hesitated at the door. There he was sitting at a corner table dressed in his usual tailored suit, but something about his demeanor was different. He wasn't the usual aloof billionaire. There was something human about him today. Ethan stood up as she walked in, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that left her momentarily breathless. She hadn't expected this subtle shift in the air, the unspoken acknowledgement of their connection. The chemistry was undeniable, even if neither of them wanted to admit it. Maxine, Ethan said, his voice low but steady. "I'm glad you could make it." She nodded, still unsure of what this meeting was even about. I'm not sure what this is. I thought maybe you wanted to help me with something, but I'm not asking for more than what I've got. I'm not looking for charity, Mr. Walker. Ethan's heart clenched. The pride in her voice was so raw, so real, he had underestimated her. She wasn't here for handouts, she wanted respect. "No, it's not charity," he replied, his voice softer now. "I want to help you, but more than that, I want to understand you. I've spent my life building an empire, Maxine, but I've never felt like I'm building anything real. I've never built something that matters until now." Maxine's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Ethan leaned in, his gaze intense. "I want to know you. I want to know why I can't stop thinking about you, about your story. I want to know the woman behind that pride, the one who has fought for everything she's ever had. I want to be a part of that, if you'll let me." Maxine stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or to walk away. But something inside her stirred. She was tempted to brush it all off as another rich man's pity. But there was something about Ethan Walker, the honesty in his eyes, that stopped her. "I don't know what you want from me, Ethan. I've fought too hard for my dignity to let anyone take that away from me." Ethan's expression softened and he nodded. "I respect that more than you know. But I'm not here to take anything from you. I want to offer you something real. Not charity, not money, but a chance at something more." Maxine didn't know what to say. Her mind raced with doubt and fear. But for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she didn't have to fight alone. The days that followed the meeting between Maxine and Ethan were filled with uncertainty. Maxine couldn't help but replay their conversation in her mind. Ethan had offered her something she had never expected from anyone: genuine care, a glimpse of a life beyond survival. But despite the attraction, the pull she felt toward him, she couldn't easily let go of the skepticism that had kept her going all these years. She had learned to trust only herself, and now here was a billionaire offering her something more, but something that felt too good to be true. For Ethan, the weight was unbearable. Every time he thought about Maxine, the questions returned. Was she really who she seemed to be? Did she believe in me? Could she ever truly let me in? Weeks went by and their worlds collided, then drifted apart, then collided again. The distance was palpable. Ethan didn't want to rush her, but the desire to make her understand how much he cared, how much he believed in her, gnawed at him. He wasn't used to waiting, especially when he had already decided what he wanted. One rainy afternoon, Ethan found himself standing in front of her apartment building, unsure whether to knock. But something inside him urged him to take the leap, to take the chance. He wasn't used to this vulnerability, but he had been brought to a breaking point. He dialed her number, and when she picked up, her voice was a mix of surprise and hesitation. "Ethan," she said, unsure. "What is it? You've done so much already. I know you think I'm just offering you another handout. But it's not about money, Maxine." "It never was," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm here because I want you to have a choice. I want you to have a life where you don't have to keep fighting just to survive. I know you've been alone, but I don't want you to be anymore. And I won't walk away until you see that." Maxine stood still for a moment. She had been fighting for so long, putting up walls, thinking that asking for help meant weakness. But what if she was wrong? What if she had been too hard on herself all these years? What if letting someone in wasn't a sign of failure, but a path to something better? Without fully realizing it, she found herself heading to the door. When she opened it, Ethan stood there drenched from the rain, his face soft yet determined. "Let me in, Maxine," he said, his voice full of warmth. Maxine stepped back, allowing him to enter, and in that moment something shifted inside her. She knew that this wasn't just about the money anymore. This wasn't a transaction. This was a man who saw her, the real her, and cared for her. Not because of pity, but because he truly wanted to be part of her life. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she whispered. "I've spent so long protecting myself and Jessica. I don't want to mess things up." "You don't have to be ready," Ethan said, reaching out to gently hold her hand. "I'm here now, and I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that, we can figure it out together." Tears welled up in Maxine's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She wasn't used to showing vulnerability, but in this moment with Ethan, it felt different. It felt safe. Weeks passed, and as the seasons changed, so did Maxine's life. She slowly began to trust Ethan, not just as a benefactor, but as a partner. Ethan supported her in ways she had never imagined possible, not by handing her money but by offering his time, his understanding, and his unconditional support. They started working together, not as two separate entities, but as a team. Ethan helped her launch a small business, something she had always dreamed of, but never had the resources to pursue. Together, they created a program that offered free childcare for single mothers in need, giving them the opportunity to pursue their dreams without the burden of choosing between work and family. And as Maxine flourished, so did their relationship. What had begun as a chance encounter had blossomed into something beautiful. Their love story wasn't just about overcoming financial hardship. It was about two people from different worlds finding a way to trust, to love, and to build a future together. Maxine's daughter Jessica, who had once been a symbol of her struggles, became the heartbeat of their new life. Ethan grew closer to her, not as an outsider, but as the father figure she had never had. He loved her as his own, and together they became a family, one built on love, mutual respect, and the unshakable belief that life could always be better no matter the past. Maxine stood at the doorway of their new home, looking out at the sprawling garden, where Ethan, Jessica, and she had spent countless hours building memories. It wasn't just the house that had changed, it was everything. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, and as the sun set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Ethan stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "We did this, Maxine, together." She smiled, leaning her head on his chest. "No, you did this. You showed me that there was more to life than just making it through." Ethan kissed the top of her head, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "And you showed me that the greatest treasure is love, Maxine." As they stood together watching the world around them, they both knew that their story was far from over. It was only just beginning. What do you think of Maxine's journey? Do you believe that love and trust can change everything, even in the most unlikely circumstances? Let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this story, leave a comment with the number 100 and share where you're watching from. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a little hope today.